that Nutrigenetics is something of the future. So in the future, we're going to know what kind of food is good for us, bad for us. We are at least going to have the option of eating according to our genes. Now, before we dive into the supplements, I just want to put a question mark on this. Is this really a thing of the future? And for this, I want to go back 20,000 years. At that time, all humans were still in Africa and Europe. And at that time, we all were hunters and gatherers. Essentially, that meant we went out with bow and arrow and we hunted deer. Mammoths were already extinct by then. So we were hunting for food and gathering plants and so on. And a baby used to have access to breast milk. So this is a standard caveman baby. And breast milk does contain lactose. And lactose is essentially a big molecule. It consists of two smaller sugars which are attached to each other. And lactose itself, if it goes into the intestine, and this is supposed to show you the intestine, it's too large to be absorbed into the bloodstream. So for the baby to be able to digest it, we first need a certain gene called the lactase gene, which tells the body how to build an enzyme, a small molecular scissors that splits lactose into the smaller sugars, glucose and galactose. And those are small enough molecules that they can be absorbed. So every baby needs this gene to be able to tolerate lactose and digest it, and then it's a very good food source. If this baby then grew up in Stone Age time, there was no more access to milk because no supermarket, no cows around. So essentially nature said, well, why should we then waste the energy of building this enzyme? It's important to conserve energy. So evolution gave us an element, a genetic element that turned off this gene with increasing age of the person. So the older this caveman got, the more the gene turned off and no more enzyme was produced. In the Stone Age, no problem, because there was no lactose anyway. So this conserved energy. If you now had a time machine and traveled back to this person and gave him a carton of milk from the supermarket, he might think it could be a good idea to drink this milk. So what would happen is lactose ends up in his intestine. There's no enzyme that digests it. And then bacteria think, hey, great, that's a very good source of energy. And bacteria would start to metabolize lactose into gases and acids and cause very severe digestive problems. And this is what we today call lactose intolerance. So actually this caveman is a person who's lactose intolerant. So he would not thank you for giving him the carton of milk because it made him very ill. So the normal ancient programming that we have in our genes is to produce a lot of this lactase enzyme at birth, and then because we need it, and then the production shuts down. And this is progressive. It could be quite fast. In some people, it happens at the age of 6. In some, it takes up to 80 years. But generally, what happens is that the production goes down, and if you keep eating dairy products or drinking milk, you become more and more lactose intolerant. So this is the normal ancient programming. And then around 7,500 years ago, something new happened. By that time, we had domesticated animals. So we suddenly had access to milk as grown-ups. However, remember, we were still lactose intolerant, so nobody was drinking the milk at that time. And then a genetic mutation happened. So it's essentially an error. The gene itself was changed, or one of the genetic letters has changed in one person. And what happened is not the gene was destroyed, but the switching off mechanism was destroyed through this error. So what happened in this grown-up is suddenly he was producing the enzyme just like a newborn baby. And he was the first person who was able to tolerate lactose in that way. And if he now had access, if he now did drink the milk from the domesticated animals, he could digest it just like a baby. So he didn't have any bad symptoms. And so just like a baby, he kept producing the enzyme. Now, 5 out of 6 people in Europe now have this mutation. So it's a lot more common than the ancestral type. So why is this? Why is this new mutation so common? And people think the following happened. We know that this was a very tough time. So a lot of people starved to death. And it is thought that this one person had one advantage. He had one extra source of food. So he could drink milk and eat dairy. And he was able to eat this food, and also his children inherited this mutation. And now we know that around 80% of Caucasian Europeans are direct descendants from this one person. This happens somewhere in the region of Sweden. We know that because Sweden has the highest level of lactose tolerance, so the new mutation, and the further you go down south in Europe, the more rare it comes. So this happened in Europe. And since Europeans were quite aggressive in traveling and colonizing the world, they brought this genetic mutation to the rest of the world. But in Africa and Asia, still almost 100% are lactose intolerant. So this is a little bit of human evolution that happened there. So the question is nutrigenetics, eating according to our genes, really something of the future? And I think I could have showed you that this is something that is as old as humanity. So this is a very clear way. So you drink milk, you feel bad. This is a quite fast way of detecting that your genes are not compatible with your food. With modern technologies, we can now go a lot deeper. And this